So I want you to imagine walking into your manager's office with an idea that you just know, I mean, you absolutely know, is going to save the company millions.
Right. You've done all the prep work.
Exactly. Yeah. You've run the numbers, you have the data, you even have the charts printed out. But before you can even finish your very first sentence, your manager just looks up from this totally stress-cluttered desk, holds up a hand and says, if this isn't on the current roadmap, I don't want to hear it.
Oof. Yeah, we are locked in, right?
Yeah, we are locked in. And most of us, when faced with that immediate brick wall, we'd usually do one of two things.
Right, fight or flight.
Exactly. We'd either spin on our heels and walk out feeling, utterly defeated, or we'd let our ego take the wheel, raise our voice, and start fiercely arguing about why they're making a huge mistake.
Which never goes well.
No, it really doesn't. But today's source material for this deep dive argues that a master persuader views that slam door very differently.
Entirely differently. They don't see it as a rejection at all.
Right. They view that exact moment of friction as the actual beginning of the negotiation.
Yeah, and it completely reframes our entire cultural understanding of what it means to convince someone of something.
I mean, we are so conditioned to view disagreements as like zero-sum warfare.
Oh, totally. We treat conversations like combat arenas. You bring your data points like ammunition, you wear your logic like armor, and you just march across the mud to bludgeon the other person until they surrender.
Until they admit you were right all along.
Right. But the documentation we are looking at today proves that approach is just biologically and psychologically doomed from the start.
And that's really what makes this stack of research so compelling. We are basically tearing down the architecture of persuasion today.
Which is so needed.
Because if you treat persuasion like a battle, the research says you have already lost before you even open your mouth. You might force compliance, if you have enough hierarchical power, but you will never actually persuade them.
And that's a huge distinction. Forcing compliance and achieving true persuasion are two entirely different neurological events.
Right.
True persuasion is this subtle, highly calibrated process of securing genuine buy-in.
So it's not about winning an argument.
No, the ultimate victory condition isn't making the other party wave a white flag. It's guiding the interaction so seamlessly that the other person feels as though the two of you have arrived at this brilliant new conclusion entirely together.
So if you're listening to this and thinking about a pitch you have to make this week, the stakes here are incredibly tangible.
Oh, very real world.
It doesn't matter if you were trying to convince a stubborn executive board to pivot a product line or, trying to get an entrenched department to adopt a completely new digital workflow.
Or even just trying to navigate a fraught conversation with your partner about where to move next year.
Exactly. The mechanics of the human brain just do not change based on the scale of the request.
The underlying cognitive architecture remains identical. The way you frame your initial proposal is the literal dividing line between triggering a threat response.
That flat, dismissive no.
Right, triggering that versus triggering a collaborative response.
I was actually trying to visualize this shift as I was reading through the source material, and the warfare analogy just felt so inadequate.
It really is.
If persuasion isn't a tug of war where one person gets dragged face first across the gravel, it's much closer to a synchronized dance.
Oh, I love that.
Right. Think about the physics of it. If you grab a dance partner and suddenly sprint in a new direction without any warning or rhythm, you don't lead them.
No, you step on their toes.
You step on their toes, you pull their shoulder out of joint, and the connection just shatters. You have to establish a shared rhythm first. You move with them to guide them.
The physics of momentum is a brilliant lens for this, actually, because in human communication, momentum is governed by psychological safety.
Okay, unpack that a bit.
Well, when you abruptly introduce a disruptive idea, you aren't just presenting information, you're introducing uncertainty.
And the brain hates uncertainty.
Exactly. The human brain interprets uncertainty as literal danger. The source material maps out a strict sequence of actions you have to take to neutralize that perceived danger before you even attempt to introduce your idea.
Which means you can't just barge in and step on their toes with your brilliant, world-changing PowerPoint deck.
No, you have to lay the groundwork. You have to get them to hear the music.
And according to the text, the absolute prerequisite to any persuasive effort is shockingly simple, yet almost universally ignored in corporate environments.
It really is. It is the act of validating the opposition.
Just validating them.
Right. If you look at transcripts of failed negotiations or stalled meetings, The most common catastrophic error is that people charge into the room leading with their own demands.
They lead with their desired outcome.
Yes.
They say, we need to migrate to the new server architecture immediately, or I need a 20% increase in the marketing budget for Q3.
Yes, and by leading with a demand, you immediately place the other person in a defensive posture.
Right away.
The fundamental rule outlined in our sources is rooted deeply in behavioral science. Human beings are exponentially more likely to process new information if they feel that their current reality has been acknowledged and validated first.
I really want to dig into the mechanics of this because it's so important. The guide says you have to show the other person that you completely understand their concerns before you even hint at presenting your own idea.
Before you even hint at it.
Yeah. The text offers some very specific phrasing like, I can definitely see where you're coming from on this. Or you make a very valid point about the sheer weight of these budget constraints.
It's the tactical application of empathy. You are demonstrating that you possess the cognitive flexibility to see the board from their side of the table.
Now, hold on. This is where I struggled a bit when reading the material, and I suspect anyone who negotiates for a living is having the exact same reaction right now.
What's that?
Well, if my entire objective in this meeting is to change my manager's mind, to move them from their current position to my new position, how does validating their current position not utterly sabotage me?
I see what you mean.
Right. If I walk in and say, you make a highly valid point about the budget constraints, aren't I just negotiating against myself?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm literally handing them the weapon they're going to use to kill my pitch. I'm validating the barrier.
That is the instinctual fear, absolutely. And it stems from conflating validation with capitulation.
Okay, capitulation.
Right. We mistakenly believe that acknowledging someone else's emotional reality or logical constraint is the exact same thing as agreeing with their conclusion.
Which it isn't.
No, not at all. And the source material is explicitly clear on how this operates on a neurological level. Validating their position is not conceding defeat. It is a disarming mechanism.
Walk me through that difference then between validating and conceding. How is it disarming?
So when you walk into a room to propose a massive change, the other person's amygdala.
The threat detection center.
Exactly. The part of the brain responsible for threat detection. It naturally flares up because change implies risk. It implies extra work.
It implies their current way of doing things might be wrong.
Yes, which threatens their ego. When they feel that threat, their brain immediately begins constructing counter-arguments while you are still speaking.
So they aren't even listening.
They aren't listening, they're reloading.
They're just waiting for me to stop making noise so they can tell me why I'm wrong.
Precisely. But when you open by stating, hey, you make a very valid point about the budget constraints, and I know we are under immense pressure to keep costs down, you introduce this cognitive dissonance to their threat response.
How so?
You are signaling, I am a collaborator, not an adversary. You are proving that you see the constraints they are sweating over.
Oh, I get it.
Once they realize they do not have to expend energy fighting you just to be understood, that cognitive load drops, their defensive shields lower. And only when those shields are absent can your actual pitch be processed by the logical centers of their brain.
Wow. That reframes it completely for me. So I'm not giving them ammunition. I'm actually taking their finger off the trigger.
That is a perfect way to put it.
If I tell them, I see the budget pressure you're under, they don't have to spend the next 10 minutes aggressively explaining the budget pressure to me.
Yeah.
I've bought their attention.
You have cleared the static from the channel. But keep in mind, clearing the static is only the first step.
Right.
Just because you have proven you aren't an active threat doesn't mean they have any motivation to adopt your idea. Disarming them doesn't mean they want to follow you.
Right. They aren't shooting at me, but they still aren't marching in my direction. Which forces us to look at the next major pivot the source material demands.
Phase 2.
Phase 2. Once you have validated their reality and lowered their defenses, you have to prove that you are both operating on the exact same team.
You have to establish common ground, and this is honestly where so many amateur negotiators fail.
Why is that?
They assume common ground naturally exists just because they work for the same company.
I was thinking about how to visualize this dynamic, and I want to bounce a physics metaphor off you.
Sure, let's hear it.
Think about a fulcrum and a lever. If you want to move a massive, heavy boulder, which represents the other person's stubborn opinion, you can't just push against it with your bare hands.
No, you won't get anywhere.
Right, you need a lever. But a lever is entirely useless floating in the air. You have to wedge it against a solid, immovable point of contact on the ground.
Yes.
That solid point of contact is the common ground. If you don't have a shared reality to place your lever against, your argument just snaps under the pressure and the boulder doesn't move an inch.
That is an exceptionally accurate representation of the cognitive shift required here. Establishing common ground is really about finding that immovable point of shared reality.
So you're changing the foundation.
You are fundamentally altering the conversational battleground. The text describes this as shifting the entire paradigm from a me versus you dynamic to an us versus the problem dynamic.
Us versus the problem. When you say it out loud, it instantly removes the personal friction. But how do you actually execute that shift in the middle of a tense conversation?
Well,
if my manager and I are bitterly divided over a software migration, how do I magically create an us versus the problem scenario?
The source provides a highly specific linguistic tool for this. You utilize phrases that anchor the conversation to a macro-level objective.
Like what?
For example, you say, I think we can both agree that the main priority here is improving our end-user engagement metrics. Or, at the end of the day, we're both aiming for a launch that doesn't crash the servers.
We'll pull those phrases apart. I think we can both agree. It almost feels like a Jedi mind trick,
It kind of is.
You are actively verbalizing a shared reality that they cannot reasonably deny.
Because you are anchoring the interaction to an ultimate goal that sits way above the current conflict. This is the crucial mechanism.
Above the conflict.
Right. When you are fighting over software, you are caught in the weeds. By zooming out and establishing that the ultimate destination is improving user engagement, any disagreement from that exact second forward is fundamentally transformed.
Transformed how? Because, we still disagree on the software itself.
Yes, but the nature of the disagreement has completely changed. When you lack common ground, every disagreement feels like a debate over motives.
Oh, that makes sense.
If you want new software and your boss wants the old software and you have an established common ground, your boss might subconsciously assume your motive is just to play with shiny new tech and waste company money.
And I might assume his motive is that he's a dinosaur who hates progress.
Exactly. And debating motives is inherently toxic. It is a personal attack on character.
Oh, wow. I see where this is going now.
But once you have both explicitly agreed that the paramount goal is saving the company money or improving user engagement, you have established that your motives are identical.
Right.
Therefore, any remaining friction is merely a debate over methods.
That is massive. Debating methods is just a collaborative puzzle. We both want to save money. Does tool A or tool B save more money?
Exactly.
We're suddenly two engineers looking at a blueprint instead of two gladiators in a pit. It completely regulates the emotional temperature of the room.
You are both pushing the boulder from the same side, using the same fulcrum. The resistance is no longer personal at all.
Okay, I am entirely sold on the psychology here. We have validated them to drop their shields. We have established common ground, so we are tackling the problem together.
Phase 1 and 2 complete.
But here's the friction point. We still have to introduce the new idea. We still have to inject a disruptive, potentially expensive, uncomfortable change into the ecosystem.
Which is the hardest part.
How do you actually put the idea on the table without shattering that very fragile us versus the problem harmony we just spent 10 minutes building?
This is the delicate transition the text refers to as the gentle pitch. And the explicit instruction is to introduce your idea as a possibility, never as a demand or a definitive statement.
The text actually warns pretty strongly against blunt force here.
Heavily. Because if you spend all this time building rapport and establishing that you share the same goals, and then you suddenly slam your hand on the desk and say, therefore, my idea is the only logical solution and we must do it, you instantly shatter the collaborative dynamic.
You undo all your hard work.
Yes, because you trigger what behavioral psychologists call reactance.
Reactance. I don't think I've heard that term.
It's a phenomenon where people experience a strong, almost involuntary emotional reaction when they feel their behavioral freedoms are being threatened or restricted.
So like being told what to do.
Precisely. When you tell someone we must do X, you are restricting their freedom to choose. Even if X is genuinely the best option, their brain will inherently rebel against the restriction of autonomy. They will push back just to prove they still have control.
So if I tell my boss, we have to use this software, his brain rejects it, not because the software is bad, but because I am threatening his authority to make the decision.
Exactly that. Which is why the source material advocates for a remarkably softened approach. You frame your ideas entirely as questions.
Just questions.
Yes. The specific scripts they suggest are This might be a bit of a long shot, but what if we considered, or I was just wondering if there might be a way to.
I am going to push back on this a little bit because I can hear the collective groans of highly assertive professionals everywhere.
I know.
The phrase, this might be a long shot, but what if we, sounds objectively timid. If I am sitting across from a senior vice president and I have spent 6 weeks researching a supply chain overhaul, framing my data as I'm just wondering if it feels like I am apologizing for having a thought.
It feels uncomfortable for a lot of people.
It sounds like I lack total conviction in my own expertise. Corporate culture tells us to speak with authority. This honestly sounds like weakness.
It is the most common critique of tactical empathy, without a doubt, but it relies on a fundamental misunderstanding of what projects true confidence.
Okay, tell me more.
The source clarifies the absolute genius behind this linguistic softening. It is not about portraying weakness or a lack of conviction at all. It is about extending an invitation. It is about managing the illusion of control.
Explain that. How does sounding tentative give me control?
When you make a definitive, authoritative statement like, my supply chain model is superior and we need to implement it, you are forcing an alternate reality onto the executive.
Right.
You give them only 2 options: submit to your reality or fight it to maintain their own. But when you ask a question, what if we considered adjusting the supply chain model this way? You are opening a cognitive door.
Oh, I see.
You are not forcing them into a box. You are inviting them to step into the idea alongside you.
I'm asking them to look at the puzzle with me rather than telling them I already solved it.
Yes, you are transforming what would have been a hostile sales pitch into a joint brainstorming session. You are deliberately granting them agency.
So the language is just a tool.
Exactly. By framing your massive amount of research as a wondering, you allow the executive to pick up the idea, turn it over in their hands, look at it from different angles, and weigh in on it without feeling like it's being shoved down their throat.
That's a huge difference in perception.
It is actually a supreme display of confidence.
Yeah.
You are essentially saying, I am so confident in the structural integrity of this idea that I don't need to force it on you. I can just casually leave it on the table, and I know you will see its value when you examine it.
That is a fascinating way to look at it. You are bypassing their reactance entirely because you aren't threatening their autonomy. You're giving them the steering wheel, but you've already paved the road so they can only drive in one direction.
You are allowing them to claim partial ownership of the discovery, and people just do not reject their own discoveries.
Okay, let's assume this works perfectly. They don't feel attacked.
Yeah.
They are looking at the idea. They are brainstorming with me, but we have to be realistic here. Even if an executive looks at a brainstormed idea and logically agrees that it is brilliant, big changes are inherently terrifying.
Oh, absolutely.
If I am asking for a complete overhaul of our data security protocol or a massive reallocation of a quarterly budget, human nature is going to look at that mountain of effort, look at the potential for catastrophic failure, and default to no.
Yes, it's safer.
It is always safer for a manager to do nothing than to do something new that might fail.
The status quo is the most powerful gravitational force in any organization. Overcoming that gravity brings us to the culmination of the entire persuasive strategy.
Phase 4.
Phase 4. The text refers to this as the master stroke of the framework, making it incredibly easy to say yes.
You have to fundamentally alter the risk profile of the decision.
Yes. Because, as you pointed out, the core obstacle isn't the quality of the idea anymore. It is risk aversion. Human beings suffer from loss aversion.
Which means?
The psychological pain of losing $100 is roughly twice as intense as the joy of gaining $100.
Wow, twice as intense.
Yeah. So if an executive implements your massive idea and it fails, the pain and career damage of that failure looms much larger in their mind than the potential profit of it succeeding. You cannot overcome loss aversion with enthusiasm. You can only overcome it by removing the potential for loss.
So how do you functionally remove the loss from a massive proposal?
You do not ask for the massive proposal. You shrink the ask. You propose a microscopic, bounded, low-risk version of the idea.
Like a test run.
Exactly. A pilot program, a localized trial run, a mini proposal.
This instantly makes me think of the psychological warfare deployed at grocery stores.
Oh, how so?
Specifically, those weekend vendor stands. You were walking down the aisle and there's a vendor selling a massive, incredibly expensive imported wheel of artisanal cheese. It's $40.
Right.
You have never heard of this brand. Your loss aversion is screaming at you. You are absolutely not going to blindly throw a $40 mystery wheel of cheese into your cart. The risk of taking it home, hating it, and losing $40 is entirely unacceptable.
The barrier to entry is just insurmountable for a casual buyer.
Right. So what is the vendor's strategy? They do not stand there with a PowerPoint presentation trying to logically persuade you that the cheese has a robust flavor profile.
No, they don't say a word about the flavor profile.
They bypass logic entirely. They hold out a tiny, brightly colored toothpick with a cubed millimeter of cheese on it. The sample is free. It takes 3 seconds of your time. If you hate it, you just throw the toothpick away. The risk is reduced to absolute zero.
Yep.
You eat the tiny cube. You realize it tastes amazing. The fear of the unknown evaporates.
Yeah.
Then you buy the $40 wheel.
It is a phenomenal real-world analog. The mini proposal is the toothpick of corporate persuasion. You are entirely de-risking the decision.
You're just giving them the toothpick.
Right. And the source material provides a script for this that is surgically precise. You say, look, I am not asking us to commit to this entire overhaul right now. Perhaps we could just run a highly contained small-scale test on one single server for 3 days.
It's so disarming because you are vocally addressing the elephant in the room, the sheer terror of a massive commitment, and explicitly taking it off the table.
Exactly.
By saying, I'm not asking us to commit to the whole thing, you are telling their panicked loss aversion circuitry to just power down.
And you are simultaneously leveraging a different psychological mechanism, which is momentum. You are intentionally manufacturing a scenario where the barrier to entry is so laughably low that saying no actually becomes the unreasonable position.
Oh, that's clever.
You are asking for a microscopic yes today, knowing that human beings naturally want to remain consistent with their past decisions. Once they say yes to the small pilot, the sunk cost fallacy begins to work in your favor.
Because they're already invested.
Right. They have invested a tiny bit of time, so when you come back a week later with the successful data, their brain is already primed to justify a larger investment.
You are building an empirical safety net. It is infinitely easier to get a deeply conservative board to agree to a 2-week zero-budget trial with 3 employees than it is to get them to agree to a permanent company-wide policy change.
You shrink the terrifying monster down into something so small it can literally fit in their pocket.
Okay, so we have deconstructed the theoretical framework. Phase 1, validate their position to lower the amygdala threat response. Phase 2, establish common ground to create a fulcrum and move from debating motives to debating methods.
Right.
Phase 3, introduce the idea as a collaborative question to bypass reactance and grant agency. And Phase 4, deploy the master stroke, shrinking the proposal into a zero-risk pilot to neutralize loss aversion.
That is the complete cognitive sequence, perfectly summarized.
But theoretical frameworks are famously useless until they get punched in the mouth by reality. What elevates this source material from good to great is that it doesn't abandon us with bullet points. It provides a full, high-stakes narrative dialogue to demonstrate exactly how these psychological levers are pulled under extreme, real-world pressure.
Yes, the case study.
Right, so let's put this entire framework through the ultimate stress test. We're going to perform a forensic breakdown of the case study provided in the text, the showdown between Liam and Maria.
This specific dialogue serves as a masterclass in applied tactical empathy. The variables are highly constrained, which really forces the technique to the surface.
Let me set the stage for you. The text drops us right into the pressure cooker of a tech company. The stakes could not be higher. They are exactly 3 weeks out from a major company-defining product launch deadline.
So everyone is stressed.
The tension in the office is thick enough to choke on.
We really have to understand the psychological state of our 2 key players here. First, we have Liam. He is the project manager. His entire professional existence, his bonus, and likely his reputation are tied exclusively to hitting this launch date. In his opening remarks to the department, he explicitly states that they are entering lockdown mode.
Lockdown mode, that sounds intense.
Very. He issues a hard mandate, no new features, absolutely no detours, stick strictly to the pre-approved roadmap. He has built a fortress around the project.
He is a man operating at maximum cognitive load. He does not have a single ounce of mental bandwidth for anything outside his peripheral vision.
Exactly.
And then we have our protagonist, Maria. She is a senior developer, and she has a massive problem.
A very big problem.
While running some late-night tests, she has stumbled upon a breakthrough idea for the user dashboard. It is innovative, it is objectively brilliant, and it is completely 100% off the original mandated roadmap.
Which is terrible timing.
It is the exact definition of the detour Liam just threatened everyone over.
The setup is designed to highlight the sheer, seemingly impossible difficulty of Maria's position. She isn't just pitching an idea, she is walking into a hostile environment where the default answer to any new stimuli has already been aggressively predetermined as no.
So she approaches Liam's desk. She asks if she can grab him for just 2 minutes. And Liam's immediate knee-jerk reaction is a solid brick wall. He doesn't even look up from his screen.
He's just done.
Right. He says, Maria, I appreciate the enthusiasm, but we're in lockdown mode. If it's not on the plan, we don't have time for it. Door slammed. Deadbolt thrown.
It is a definitive, authoritative rejection before she has even articulated a single syllable of her proposal.
I want to pause the tape right here. Let's analyze the normal human reaction to this exact moment. I think the vast majority of professionals, faced with that level of preemptive dismissal from a stressed-out boss, would fall into one of two traps.
Which?
Trap number one, the flight response. They swallow their pride, mutter, okay, sorry to bother you, and walk away entirely defeated. The company tragically loses out on a breakthrough because the employee was intimidated.
Happens all the time.
Trap number two, the fight response. Their ego gets bruised, their heart rate spikes, and they start forcefully arguing. But Liam, you don't even know what I'm going to say. This idea is too good to ignore. You have to look at the numbers.
And then you're in a spiral.
Right. Suddenly you are in a combative spiral.
Yeah.
And Liam digs his heels in even deeper because you are now an active threat to his authority.
Both the fight and flight responses are evolutionary defaults. And in a corporate negotiation, both lead to absolute failure. But Maria does not succumb to her lizard brain.
No, she doesn't.
She overrides the instinct to defend herself. Let's look at how she flawlessly executes phase one. She does not argue. She does not defend her enthusiasm. She does not challenge his authority.
So what does she do?
Instead, she leans into his reality. She says, I know. And I completely get the pressure we're under with the deadline. You're right to keep us on track.
It is genuinely jarring how agreeable she is in the face of a direct rejection.
Yeah.
He just shut her down, and she essentially responds, "You're a brilliant manager for shutting me down."
It is verbal Aikido. She is taking the momentum of his rejection and letting it pass right by her. She validates his extreme cortisol-fueled stress.
She acknowledges the reality of the 3-week deadline.
Yes. And most importantly, she validates his mandate as a manager to keep the team focused. She tells him he is right.
And the immediate neurological shift in Liam is written right into the text. We get to watch the amygdala threat response deactivate in real time. He has his armor on, his spear raised, ready to fight off a rogue developer trying to ruin his timeline.
And
She validates him, and his posture instantly, visibly sags. The tension leaves his shoulders. His literal next words are, "Thank you." So what's on your mind? Quickly.
that thank you is the sound of cognitive relief. Her validation literally bought her the floor. By enthusiastically agreeing with his underlying anxiety, the deadline, she proved she was not a chaotic element trying to sabotage it. He granted her access because she disarmed his primary fear.
The door was locked and deadbolted, and she just slid a mirror under the door, showed him his own stress, and he opened it for her.
A great way to visualize it.
But as Liam's condition, saying quickly makes clear, she is on a very short leash. She only has a few seconds of his attention, and he is still highly anxious.
Very anxious.
Now she has to pivot from validation to her pitch without triggering that lockdown reflex a second time.
This is the danger zone. Maria knows her window of opportunity is measured in seconds. If she immediately jumps into the technical specs of her dashboard idea, Liam's brain will instantly calculate the extra hours of coding required, and the wall will slam back down.
So she has to pivot.
She must deploy phase 2, establishing common ground. She must build the fulcrum. Before she mentions a single line of code, she anchors their interaction to the macro objective.
Her exact phrasing is a masterclass in alignment. She says, I think we can both agree that our ultimate goal isn't just to launch on time, but to launch something that actually gets people talking and keeps them on the platform.
Let's really unpack the absolute brilliance of this specific framing. Liam's immediate localized goal is purely survival. Push the button on time, don't get fired.
Right.
Maria takes the lens and aggressively zooms it out. She elevates their conversation to the ultimate existential goal of the company. By stating this, she is actively insulating her upcoming idea from being perceived as a frivolous, self-indulgent pet project.
She is preemptively proving that she isn't just a bored senior developer looking to play with shiny new architecture for her own amusement.
Exactly.
She is reminding him, forcefully but politely, that they are in the exact same boat, rowing violently toward the exact same victory condition, a product that doesn't just exist but dominates the market.
She has moved entirely to his side of the table. She has shifted the dynamic from Maria versus Liam's timeline to Maria and Liam versus the challenge of user retention.
Us versus the problem.
Right. And only now, with the fulcrum firmly established and their motives completely aligned, does she actually reveal the lever. She makes her pitch.
And it's a hell of a pitch. She explains that she ran some unauthorized performance tests and found a major breakthrough. She has a method to make the user dashboard 50% faster, and she can integrate real-time data feeds that none of their major competitors are currently offering. She explicitly labels it a game changer.
It sounds phenomenal on paper, but we must view this through the lens of Liam's highly stressed psychology.
Right, put yourself in his shoes.
Liam is a project manager with 21 days until launch. When he hears phrases like 50% faster and real-time data integration, his brain does not hear market dominance.
What does he hear?
His brain translates those words into massive code rewrite, unforeseen bugs, server crashes, and missed deadlines. His loss aversion is screaming.
Which is a completely rational, mathematically sound fear for a project manager to have.
Highly irrational.
And predictably, he pushes back hard. He admits the idea sounds significant, the validation worked enough that he's actually listening, but he clearly articulates the danger. It is a massive deviation from the architecture that could add weeks to their QA testing timeline.
So what does he say?
He delivers his second hard rejection of the conversation. He says, Maria, it sounds great, but we can't risk it right now. Maybe for version 2.0.
Maybe for version 2.0. That is perhaps the most common corporate dyslexia in the English language.
Oh, absolutely.
Let's put a pin in it. Let's circle back next quarter. It is a polite, cowardly no. It is a mechanism to kill an idea without having to engage in the conflict of an outright rejection.
So Liam has now said no for the second time. He has offered the version 2.0 off-ramp. If Maria pushes harder now and insists they do it for version 1.0, she breaks the common ground.
She becomes an adversary again.
Exactly. How does she prevent this from being the absolute end of the road?
She doesn't fight the rejection. She accepts the premise of his fear, and then she deploys the masterstroke. She shrinks the terrifying idea.
Wait, before we get to the masterstroke, I noticed something in the text that blew my mind on the second read. Before she shrinks the idea, she actually deploys phase 1 again.
You caught that. Yes, she does.
It proves that persuasion isn't just a linear checklist you complete and abandon. It's a continuous, cyclical loop.
Exactly.
When faced with his deep-seated fear about the risk to the timeline, she doesn't tell him he's being paranoid. She doesn't pull out charts to prove the code is easy. She validates the fear itself.
Right. She meets him where he is.
She says, I've been thinking about that exact same thing, and I wouldn't suggest it if I thought it would jeopardize the launch. But you're right, it's a new element, and it carries risk.
She is relentlessly committing to psychological safety. She's constantly reinforcing the idea that she is a safe actor. You're right, it carries risk. She's validating his caution. And then, immediately after validating the risks, she introduces the mechanism to neutralize it.
She drops the mini proposal. Phase 4 in spectacular action. I'm going to read her exam quote because it is just such a beautifully constructed airtight compromise.
Go for it.
She says, what if we could test the idea without derailing the main project? Look, I'm not asking for the whole team to switch gears. Give me one junior developer and 2 days. Just a 2-day sprint. We'll build a self-contained prototype.
Let's deeply analyze the strict, uncompromising boundaries Maria constructs around her idea here, because this is the absolute mechanics of de-risking in its purest, most potent form.
She's building a box.
She's building a titanium box around her prototype so tight that Liam's anxieties simply cannot penetrate it.
And neutralizes them before he can even open his mouth to object. Nightmare 1, this distraction will derail my senior engineering team.
And her counter.
Her counter. I'm not asking for a whole team, just me and one junior developer.
Nightmare 2. This is going to bleed into our final QA testing timeline.
Her counter, 2 days. Just a strict 48-hour sprint.
Nightmare 3. If this experimental code fails, it's going to corrupt the main repository and ruin the stable build.
Her counter, We will build a completely self-contained prototype. It won't touch the main code base.
It's perfect.
And then she delivers the kicker, the ultimate zero-risk safety net. If, at the exact end of 48 hours, I can't show you a working model that completely blows you away, we scrap it immediately. No time lost from the main project.
She has successfully transmuted a massive, terrifying, potentially career-ending structural rebuild into an almost mathematically zero-risk proposition. She has manipulated the risk-to-reward ratio so heavily in her favor that making a decision to say no actually becomes the illogical choice.
Right.
If Liam says no, he is actively turning down a massive market-dominating competitive advantage for the utterly trivial cost of merely 2 days of a single junior developer's time.
He would feel stupid saying no to that. And we get to witness Liam's capitulation right there in the text. You can almost hear the gears grinding in his head as the panic recedes and the logic takes over.
Yes, think about it.
He pauses. He's running the risk calculation. And he says, 2 days. That's it.
He is testing the perimeter of the box she built. He is confirming the boundaries of the risk.
Maria holds firm. 2 days. And Liam exhales, nods, and agrees. He literally says, okay, Maria, you've made a compelling case. You have your 2-day sprint. Show me something amazing.
The overarching takeaway from this entire narrative autopsy, as heavily emphasized by the source material, is profound. Maria did not win an argument.
Not at all. She barely even argued the merits of the dashboard.
Exactly. She did not prove Liam's innate caution was factually wrong. She did not force him to intellectually admit that her new vision was inherently superior to his carefully planned roadmap.
So what did she do?
What she did was meticulously construct an opportunity.
She guided him across the dance floor without ever stepping on his toes. She led him right to the spot she wanted him to be, and she made him feel like it was a safe place to stand.
Precisely. She navigated his legitimate high-stress anxieties. She continuously validated his perspective to prevent the amygdala hijack.
Right.
She aligned her wild idea with his overarching existential goals, and then finally she offered him an entirely insulated, risk-free method to experience her vision without any threat of loss.
If you are listening to this right now, I really want you to internalize how universal this application is. It does not matter if you are Maria in a glass-walled boardroom negotiating a high-tech software launch feature with a stressed project manager, or if you are simply sitting in your kitchen trying to convince your deeply routine-oriented spouse to try a radical new vacation destination instead of going to the same lake house you go to every summer.
The context doesn't matter.
Exactly. The neurological mechanisms governing the friction are identical. Validating their hesitation, finding the shared goal of relaxing, and making your request incredibly cheap or safe to try giving them the toothpick with the tiny cube of cheese on it is the ultimate master key to human influence.
It is a methodology that fundamentally respects the autonomy, the ego, and the legitimate fears of the person you are attempting to guide, which is precisely why it circumvents all the traditional defense mechanisms.
All right, let's briefly trace the arc of the journey we've been on today. The source material has challenged us to completely abandon the battlefield metaphor of persuasion.
It's not a war.
It is not a clash of logic. It is a sequenced psychological operation. Phase 1, you must validate the other person's reality to short-circuit their defensive threat response.
Right.
Phase 2, you must establish a macro-level shared goal to create a fulcrum, moving the conflict from a toxic debate over motives to a collaborative debate over methods.
Us versus the problem.
Phase 3, you must introduce your idea gently, as an open question, granting them the agency to brainstorm rather than triggering their reactance to a demand. And Phase 4, you must shrink your grant proposal down into a tiny, contained, zero-risk pilot program that totally bypasses their innate loss aversion.
4 distinct sequential phases that, if practiced, can completely alter the trajectory of both your professional negotiations and your interpersonal relationships.
And that brings us to the real world. Our call to action for you this week is to take this framework out of the theoretical realm and stress test it yourself. Sometime in the next few days, you are going to encounter friction.
It's inevitable.
You're going to need to convince someone of something, and they are going to resist. It could be a massive budget approval, or it could be deciding whose family to visit for the holidays. When you feel that friction, catch yourself before your ego takes over and you start blindly listing logical reasons why you were right. Stop, take a breath, and actively run this exact 4-phase sequence. Don't force compliance. Engineer an opportunity.
And as we close out this analysis, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought to process on your own time.
Oh, I like the sound of this.
It is a philosophical conundrum that arises directly from the source material's intense reliance on collaborative outcomes.
Hiss with it.
If the absolute pinnacle of true persuasion requires making the other person genuinely feel like they reached the conclusion alongside you, and if that process relies entirely on softening your original pitch, stripping away your rigid demands, and voluntarily shrinking your grand, perfect vision into a tiny, compromised, low-risk pilot program who actually owns the idea at the end of the day.
Oh, wow.
Is true persuasion about manipulating the board to get exactly what you wanted from the very start, completely untouched and unaltered? Or is the secret to true persuasion a willingness to let your own precious idea mutate and evolve the very moment you invite someone else's mind into it?
Wow. That is a heavy concept to walk away with. Is it even your idea anymore if you had to let them successfully shape it just to bypass their defenses? That is definitely something to chew on the next time you find yourself handing out those metaphorical cheese samples in a meeting. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the architecture of influence.
It has been an absolute privilege deconstructing these mechanics with you.
Take care, everyone. We will see you on the next deep dive. Think about what happens when you accidentally knock a knife off the kitchen counter right in front of you.
Oh, yeah. Terrifying.
Right. Like you don't pause to calculate the trajectory of the blade.
Definitely not.
You don't take a moment to assess whether grabbing a sharp falling object is actually a sound strategic move.
No, you just react.
Exactly. You just have this immediate, unfiltered, completely neurological reflex to reach out and try to catch it before it hits the floor.
You just lunge for it.
You just lunge. And, almost every single time, you end up getting cut.
Because it is an incredibly dangerous automatic instinct.
Yeah.
Your brain sees something dropping, it registers a potential mess or a disaster, and it immediately commands you to be the one who intercepts it in that, split second.
Even if it hurts you.
Right, regardless of the personal physical cost.
Okay, but here is where it gets really interesting for us today. Welcome to the Deep Dive, by the way. I'm your host, here to guide us through today's mission.
And I'm the resident expert, ready to break down the psychology of this with you.
So we have that exact same dangerous, unthinking reflex in the workplace. But instead of falling cutlery, it's extra work.
A falling project.
Exactly. A colleague drops a sudden, massively complex project on your desk at 4:00 p.m.
The worst time.
The worst. Or your boss casually mentions an urgent, poorly defined deadline, and your professional reflex just kicks into overdrive.
You don't even think about it.
No. Before you have even mentally checked your calendar, before you have processed the actual weight and scope of what's being asked of you, your mouth is already forming the word yes.
Because you're lunging to catch the knife.
You're lunging. But today, for you listening, we are going for a massive paradigm shift. Today's mission is tackling the flip side of persuasion.
Which is so important.
It really is. We're diving into an incredible stack of research today, an in-depth analysis on setting professional boundaries, paired with a genuinely fascinating real-world workplace case study.
To figure out how to rewire this exact reflex.
Right. Because while getting a yes from someone is a great skill, we are looking at something that is often much harder.
And arguably vastly more critical to your long-term success.
I totally agree. We are diving deep into the highly strategic art of saying no.
It is a profound shift in mindset, and it's a completely necessary one. But to get there, it requires us to immediately confront the absolute elephant in the room.
Oh, the big one.
Right. The immense cultural and professional pressure to be what corporate environments lovingly and sometimes coercively call a team player.
The team player trap.
Yes. There is this pervasive, deep-seated underlying narrative in almost every industry that saying no automatically makes you unhelpful.
You feel like a villain if you say it.
Exactly. The fear is that it paints you as an obstructionist, or worse, that it signals a fundamental lack of dedication to your career.
Which is terrifying for anyone trying to move up.
Of course, but what the research we are analyzing today really illuminates is that this is a total misconception.
It's a trap.
It is a trap. We are going to completely dismantle the idea that saying no is a sign of weakness or laziness.
Instead, we're looking at the data.
Right. We're going to look at the data and the underlying psychology that reveals saying no as a hallmark of incredibly strategic, highly self-aware professionalism.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
Because the pressure you're talking about is just so viscerally real.
Oh, absolutely.
Like if you are listening to this right now, whether you're, I don't know, commuting or walking the dog or sitting at your desk, you have probably felt that exact pressure this week.
Certainly.
You want to be the reliable one. You want to be the go-to person. The analysis points out that the pressure to be a team player is incredibly intense, and it gets completely misinterpreted by almost everyone as a mandatory directive to accept every single request that comes your way.
We just internalize it that way.
We really do.
Yeah.
But I have to play devil's advocate and push back here for a second.
Go for it.
Because in the real world, the iron isn't saying no to your boss, basically career sabotage.
It feels like it. Right. Like if my manager comes to me with something they're stressing about, and I look them in the eye and say no, it feels like I'm just being stubbornly uncooperative. Doesn't that put a target on my back?
That is the exact fear that keeps everyone trapped in the relentless cycle of yes.
It's scary.
It is. Because we universally conflate availability with value.
Wow. Wait, say that again?
We conflate availability with value. We think, if I am always available, I am indispensable.
Huh. If I'm always on, I'm the best.
Exactly. But let's look at the reality outlined in the data here. Saying yes too often doesn't actually make you a hero.
It doesn't.
No. It doesn't make you the MVP of the office. In fact, the research clearly demonstrates that it leads directly to a very specific, very destructive, toxic triad of outcomes.
The toxic triad.
Yes. This triad is identified as burnout, low quality work, and resentment.
Oh, wow.
And what's really fascinating is how predictably these three things follow one another when the boundary mechanism is broken. The toxic triad. I like that framing.
Yeah.
Let's think about this with an analogy, because I think it helps to visualize the mechanics of why saying yes actually makes us worse at our jobs over time.
Analogies are great for this.
So imagine treating your own brain and energy capacity like a smartphone.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Every time you say yes to a new request, you're basically opening another background app.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, yes, I'll join the social committee. Boom, an app is running.
Taking up battery.
Right. Yes, I can quickly review that 50-page document by 5 o'clock. Boom, another massive app is pulling data and draining memory.
A heavy app.
Yeah, a super heavy one. Yes, I will cover for John while he is on vacation. That is basically a system update running in the background while you are trying to navigate traffic.
That's a perfect way to describe it.
And you keep doing this because you want to be viewed as like a top-tier, high-performing premium smartphone.
Which is an admirable, totally natural human drive. I mean, you want to be capable.
Exactly. You want to be the newest model.
Yeah.
But what actually happens to the hardware?
It degrades.
The battery drains in half the time, the processor gets physically hot,
You start freezing.
the screen starts freezing,
Okay.
and eventually, because the load is simply too high for the available RAM, the whole system just lags and inevitably crashes.
A total shutdown.
Right, you aren't being a high-performing phone anymore. You are a totally unresponsive brick. You are no good to anyone, not even the people you originally said yes to.
That is a perfect analogy because it highlights the systemic, mechanical failure of the yes reflex.
It's not a moral failing.
Exactly. It's not about a lack of willpower. It is about finite systemic resources.
Right.
Let's analyze that toxic triad through the lens of your smartphone analogy, really breaking down what it looks like in a real person's life.
Okay, let's do it.
First, you have burnout. That is the battery completely draining to zero.
The dreaded 0%.
Right. But in human terms, this isn't just feeling a little tired on a Friday afternoon.
No, it's deeper than that.
Much deeper. Burnout is the profound physical and mental exhaustion that comes from trying to process too many concurrent tasks over a sustained period.
It's the brain fog.
It's the brain fog. It's waking up on a Tuesday and feeling physically nauseous at the thought of opening your inbox.
Oh man, I've been there.
Most of us have. Because your central nervous system is perpetually in fight or flight mode.
It is your body literally forcing a shutdown because you refuse to do it yourself.
Precisely. Your body sets the boundary if you won't. And then second in the triad, you have the low quality work.
Which is the system lag.
Yes, the system lag you mentioned. When you say yes to everything, your cognitive resources are spread so incredibly thin that the actual execution of those tasks suffers dramatically.
You can't focus.
Right. You think you are multitasking, but neuroscience tells us you are actually just rapidly task switching, which severely degrades focus.
You're just jumping back and forth.
Exactly. And you start making compounding errors. You miss a critical detail in a report. You send an email to the wrong client. Oh, that's the worst feeling.
It is. You aren't doing 5 things well, you're doing 10 things poorly. You have diluted your own excellence.
Wow.
And third, and perhaps the most insidious, is resentment.
The heat radiating off the phone?
Yes, the thermal throttling. You start to harbor deep, dark frustration toward the people asking things of you.
Even though you agreed to do it.
That's the crazy part. You start viewing your colleagues not as teammates, but as threats to your time. You snap at your partner when you get home.
Right.
And this is the truly painful, highly ironic part, like you just said. You are the one who agreed to do the work.
Yeah, the anger is completely misdirected.
Entirely.
Yeah.
You are mad at them for asking, but you really should be examining your own inability to establish a perimeter.
Wow. The resentment aspect is so incredibly real.
It's palpable in some offices.
Right. I mean, we've all been there sitting at our desks at 7 p.m., seething with anger at a manager who went home at 5:00.
Oh, definitely. Completely forgetting that when they asked if we could take the project on at like 9:00 a.m., we smiled and cheerfully said, absolutely no problem.
We volunteered for the misery.
We did. The resentment is usually directed outward when it really should be a blaring alarm bell that our own boundaries are broken.
That's exactly how the research frames it. And if we connect this psychological reality to the bigger picture, I want to invite you to consider the macro implications of this.
Okay, like company-wide?
Yes. Think about an entire organization filled with people who fundamentally cannot say no.
Sounds chaotic.
Imagine a culture where everyone is a chronic people pleaser. On the surface, to an outsider as a naive CEO, it looks like a hyper-productive, incredibly agreeable, vibrant culture.
Right. Everyone is always saying, yes, I'm on it.
I'll get it done.
It sounds like an executive's dream.
It does, until you look at the actual metrics, because in reality, it isn't productive at all.
It's all lag.
It's all lag. It is a fragile house of cards built on severely compromised standards. Deadlines are constantly missed because people overcommitted.
The quality drop.
The quality of deliverables drops across the board because everyone's processor is lagging. And eventually, employee turnover skyrockets.
Because of the burnout.
Exactly. The top performers hit that wall of physical burnout and leave for a healthier environment. A company comprised entirely of yes people is structurally unsound.
That makes so much sense.
It lacks the internal friction necessary to prioritize effectively.
Which brings us to a massive pivot in how we need to understand this entire concept.
The definition of a boundary.
Right. The research we are looking at completely redefines what a boundary actually is. A professional boundary is not a brick wall you build to dodge work.
Not at all.
It is not a tool for the lazy to avoid responsibility. The material explicitly states that setting a boundary is about protecting your ability to do your core job well.
That is the absolute crux of the issue.
Your core job.
Yes. When you sign an employment contract, you are hired to perform a specific core function. You have a primary zone of genius that the company is paying for.
Right. Your actual job description.
Exactly. When you blindly say yes to peripheral requests, the random committees, the extra favors, the busy work that belongs to another department, you are actively diluting your ability to execute that core function.
You're stealing from your own job.
You really are.
Yeah.
You are actually doing a massive disservice to your employer by saying yes to the wrong things.
Wow.
A boundary, therefore, is a protective perimeter around your primary responsibilities. It ensures that the main thing stays the main thing.
I love that. The main thing stays the main thing.
It is an act of loyalty to your core role.
Okay, I love this framing. It makes saying no feel almost noble.
It should feel noble.
But let's be pragmatic here for a second.
Sure.
If saying no is actually essential for maintaining the quality of our core work, the million-dollar question is, how do we physically do it?
The tactical execution.
Right. Because theory is clean, but real life is terrifying.
Always.
We have all been in that scenario where you're staring at a spreadsheet with practically bleeding red formatting errors. You're stressed out of your mind, and your boss walks in holding a donut, looking overly friendly.
The dreaded friendly boss with the donuts?
You know it's a track. You know they're about to hand you a weekend-ruining project.
Oh, absolutely.
So how do we say no in that exact moment without sounding like a complete jerk, without ruining the relationship and, without getting fired?
Right.
And this leads us to the fundamental mindset shift that our research lays out today. It is the absolute core philosophy of the perfect professional pushback.
And this philosophy rests entirely on understanding the critical difference between two seemingly similar but wildly different concepts.
Which are?
Capacity versus willingness.
Ah, yeah.
If you can internalize this difference, it changes everything about how you communicate in the office.
Yes. The analysis explicitly points out that the key to an effective no is making it entirely about capacity, not willingness.
Exactly.
You aren't saying, I don't want to do this. You are saying, I am not physically or temporally able to do this right now.
It's a huge difference.
When I read that, it felt like such a subtle linguistic distinction. But the more I thought about it, it is an incredibly powerful light bulb moment.
What's really fascinating here is the underlying evolutionary psychology of why this works so effectively on the human brain.
Oh, the psychology of it. Do tell.
Well, when someone asks you for a favor or a manager assigns you a task, there is an inherent social vulnerability in that request.
Because they might get rejected.
Exactly. They're extending a bid for cooperation. If your response is perceived as a lack of willingness, if they hear or even just interpret, I don't want to do this for you, their brain immediately processes that as a personal social rejection.
Oh, wow. It triggers that tribal fear of being ostracized.
Exactly. It feels incredibly dismissive. And what happens when a human being feels personally dismissed?
They get defensive.
It triggers an emotional, often highly defensive fight-or-flight response. Their ego gets bruised. They might think, oh, they think they're too good for this project, or they don't respect my authority.
They take it personally.
It instantly turns a simple logistical conversation about workload into an interpersonal battle of wills.
It becomes deeply personal, even if it's just about an Excel spreadsheet.
Precisely. But by shifting the focus entirely to capacity, you perform this sort of psychological sleight of hand.
A magic trick.
Basically, yeah. You completely remove the emotional sting for the requester. You are changing the dynamic from an interpersonal conflict to an objective logistical reality.
It's just facts.
Right. You are effectively saying, my desire to help you is fully present, but the physical constraints of time, energy, and physics simply do not allow for it.
You blame the clock.
You align yourself with them against the problem of time rather than opposing them.
To put that in perspective for you listening, I want you to really imagine the difference in your own physical reaction.
That is a great exercise.
Let's say you are overwhelmed and you go to a colleague you trust and ask for their help on a critical presentation.
Okay, picture that.
Imagine they look at you, sigh, and say, look, I really don't want to help you with that right now. It's not my thing.
Ouch.
Right. Your chest tightens. You feel instantly alienated, maybe even a little angry. You feel judged.
Because it's a personal rejection.
Exactly. Now, rewind that tape. Imagine that same colleague looking at you with genuine empathy and saying, I would love to dive into that with you, but I literally do not have the hours in the day to take it on right now.
Completely different feeling.
The rejection vanishes.
Yeah.
Poof. Gone. You might still be incredibly stressed about your presentation, but you aren't mad at your colleague. You understand the math of this situation.
Yeah.
You can't be angry at someone for not having more than 24 hours in a day.
Exactly. It neutralizes the threat response. It takes the ego completely out of the equation for both parties.
Because it's just logistics.
You aren't a bad person for saying no, and they aren't a bad person for asking. It's just math. And once you have deeply internalized that mindset, that you are always declining based on objective capacity, not subjective willingness, you are finally ready to actually construct the response.
Which brings us to the incredibly practical, tactical part of our deep dive.
The fun stuff.
The researchers provide a literal 3-step toolkit for delivering the perfect no.
And it's so beautifully structured.
It really is.
Huh.
But it's also nuanced. Let's look at the very first contact moment. The first step here is what they call acknowledge and appreciate.
Right. Before you do anything else, before you even hint at your own workload, you start by validating the request.
Okay.
The framework suggests opening with phrases like, thanks so much for thinking of me for this, or that sounds like a really interesting and high-impact project.
Okay, I have to stop you there.
Sure.
Because my immediate cynical thought when I read this was, why on earth are we complimenting the project right before we reject it?
It does sound a bit odd at first.
Right. Isn't that sending incredibly mixed signals? Like, isn't that almost gaslighting the person, building them up just to knock them down?
It is a very fair skepticism, and a lot of people struggle with this step because it feels counterintuitive.
Yeah.
But the psychological function of this step is vital. It acts as a conversational softener. Or a bridge.
A bridge.
Think back to our discussion about the vulnerability of asking for help. When you explicitly acknowledge the importance of the project and you express appreciation for being considered, you are demonstrating to the other person that you have genuinely heard them.
Ah, I see.
You haven't just reflexively swatted their request away like an ignoring fly. You are showing respect for their priorities.
Okay, so it proves I actually listened to them.
Exactly. It immediately disarms any potential defensiveness. They feel seen and validated.
Okay, that makes sense.
It sets a collaborative, respectful tone, even though a refusal is coming. You are basically saying, your work is important and I respect it. It makes the pill they are about to swallow much, much sweeter.
It's like an emotional shock absorber. You are cushioning the impact before you hit the pothole.
That's a great way to put it.
Okay, so you have laid the groundwork. You have built a bridge. They feel respected. Now we move to the hard part.
Step 2.
The second step is the clear and reasoned decline. This is where you actually drop the bomb without burning the bridge you just built.
Exactly.
And the core instruction here is that you need to provide a brief, professional reason tied directly to your workload using very specific, careful language.
The precision of your language here is paramount. The absolute worst thing you can do, and we all do this when we're nervous and trying to people please,
Oh, what am I going to say?
is start over-explaining.
Yes.
We start rambling through a 5-minute apology tour. I'm so sorry, I would love to, but my dog is sick and I have this other thing and I'm just so tired.
Oh, I've done that. You just keep talking, hoping they will eventually take pity on you.
And it completely undermines your professional authority. You sound guilty, which implies you are doing something wrong by saying no.
Right, because you shouldn't feel guilty for having limits.
Exactly. Instead, you want to use crisp, objective language of capacity. The templates provided are excellent. Unfortunately, I don't have the bandwidth to take that on at the moment, or my plate is currently at maximum capacity.
And there's one specific phrase highlighted in the research that I absolutely fixated on.
Which one?
I think it is brilliant, but I want to challenge it a bit. The phrase is, given my current commitments, I wouldn't be able to give that the attention it deserves.
Ah, yes.
A classic. Now, I call this a work of art in my notes, but part of me wonders, wait, doesn't that sound a bit like corporate PR speak?
It can, yeah.
If I say the attention it deserves to a stressed-out manager whose hair is on fire, aren't they just going to roll their eyes at the jargon?
That is a fascinating challenge. It can sound like PR speak if your delivery is robotic, but let's look at the actual mechanics of why it is suggested as a gold standard response. Why did it strike you as a work of art initially?
Well, initially, because it completely reframes the refusal.
Right.
You aren't saying no because you want to go home and watch Netflix. You are saying no out of profound reverence for their project.
Exactly.
You are elevating their request, treating it as something precious and important that requires high-level focus, and humbly admitting that your current exhausted state would insult the project.
And that is exactly why it transcends corporate jargon when used correctly. You hit the nail on the head. It frames your refusal as a deep, unwavering commitment to quality.
Yeah.
And this is why it is essentially corporate judo. You are using the momentum of their own desire for good work to protect your boundaries.
Corporate judo. I love that.
Think about it from a managerial perspective. When an employee says, I cannot give this the attention it deserves, they are no longer rejecting work. They have suddenly positioned themselves as a guardian of the company's standard.
Oh, that was powerful.
They are implicitly saying, if I take this on right now, I will do it poorly, and I refuse to deliver a substandard product with your name and my name on it.
That's a hard argument to beat.
That is an argument that is nearly impossible for a competent manager to analyze. If a manager gets openly angry at you for actively protecting the quality of the company's output, that reveals a fundamental, glaring flaw in their leadership style, not in your work ethic.
It's bulletproof. You are making it about the work, not about you.
Exactly.
Okay, so we have softened the blow. We have delivered the clear, quality-focused decline without apologizing for existing. Most people would stop there.
They would.
But there is a final piece. The third step is called the constructive alternative. And frankly, this seems like the master move that separates the amateurs from the pros.
It really is the ultimate differentiator between a good, acceptable boundary and a truly great, career-enhancing one.
So what is it?
The third step is where you proactively offer a different solution. You are no longer just a roadblock. You are saying, I cannot personally execute Plan A, but here is how we can still collectively solve the problem with Plan B.
The breakdown gives us a few tactical ways to do this, right? You can suggest a new timeline. For example, I can't jump on this right now, but if it can wait until after the 15th when the Miller report is finally off my desk, I can give it my full attention.
That's one option.
Or you can recommend an alternative resource. My schedule is packed, but Sarah in operations has amazing experience with this specific software and might have bandwidth.
Delegation, essentially.
Or, and this is my personal favorite because it gives them a taste of your help, you offer a smaller, highly defined level of involvement.
Yes, the limited scope option.
I simply don't have the capacity to lead this whole project, but I would be more than happy to sit in on a 30-minute planning meeting on Tuesday to give you my initial strategic thoughts.
If we look at the psychological mechanics of why this works, it loops all the way back to our very first point about the pressure to be a team player.
Ah, right.
This final step is what separates a simple, flat no from a highly strategic no.
Because it shows you care.
Yes. A simple no, even if polite, leaves the requester holding the bag. It creates a dead end for them. They now have to go start from scratch to solve their problem.
Which is frustrating for them.
Exactly. But by offering a constructive alternative, you unequivocally prove that you are still very much a team player. You keep yourself firmly seated at the table in the role of a collaborative problem solver.
You're still on their side.
You are still actively helping them navigate the obstacle. You just aren't sacrificing your own vital bandwidth to do it.
You are handing them a map instead of carrying them up the mountain on your own back.
A very apt, highly visual way to look at it. You remain an asset, not an obstacle.
Okay, so this 3-step toolkit is incredibly logical. Acknowledge and appreciate. Clear and reasoned decline based on capacity. Constructive alternative.
It's a solid framework.
It is a beautiful, clean framework. But let's be entirely honest with ourselves. Theory is clean, but real life in a busy office is incredibly messy.
Very true.
Real managers don't always read the HR script. They panic. They push back.
I do.
So let's take this perfectly sterile framework out of the laboratory and apply it to the mud of the real world.
Let's do it.
The material we are looking at provides a brilliant, in-depth case study, a transcript of dialogue that perfectly illustrates this dynamic in action. Let's look at the setup for the players involved.
The primary players in this scenario are David, a middle manager who is clearly under the gun and feeling the heat from above, and Chloe, his go-to high-performing employee.
Yes, Chloe is the classic premium smartphone we talked about earlier. She is reliable, she is fast, so she naturally gets all the heavy downloads.
Right.
The situation is a classic pressure cooker. David urgently needs a comprehensive marketing analysis on a competitor's surprise new product launch, and he needs it ready for a high-stakes strategy meeting on Friday.
A nightmare scenario.
Complete nightmare. Meanwhile, Chloe is already completely maxed out. She is deep in the final, grueling testing phase of a massive internal initiative called the Alpha Project, which has a hard, unmoving deadline on Thursday.
It is the archetype of workplace conflict, a classic collision of competing priorities.
Doesn't have to give.
Right. The manager needs an immediate, unpredictable fire put out, and the most capable employee is already at absolute maximum capacity, holding the line on a core, pre-existing deliverable that the company also desperately needs.
Let's look really closely at how David initiates this interaction, because it is so common, it actually hurts to read.
Oh, it really does.
He doesn't come in and say, "I have a terrible burden for you." He walks up to her desk, probably smiles, and says something to the effect of, "Got a minute. A fantastic opportunity just landed on our desk."
Opportunity.
Right. And then he frames the extra backbreaking work by saying it's a highly visible project and a great chance to really impress the executive leadership team. He even throws in a little flattery, calling her his sharpest analyst.
This requires very careful analysis because what David is doing here is a classic, pervasive, and often completely subconscious managerial maneuver.
Is it on purpose?
Usually not maliciously, but it's effective. He is actively framing a massive stressful burden as a golden career opportunity.
It's the opportunity trap.
Exactly. And we need to dissect why this trap works so well. It is incredibly effective because it weaponizes the employee's own ambition and drive against their limited capacity.
How so? Walk me through the mechanics of that weaponization.
When David frames the sudden, overwhelming task as a great chance to impress leadership, he changes the stakes of the conversation entirely.
He raises the stakes.
Yes. He makes a potential no from Chloe feel incredibly dangerous to her future. He creates a psychological environment where declining the extra work feels entirely synonymous with turning down career advancement.
Oh, wow.
It triggers that primal fight or flight response we discussed earlier, but this time regarding her livelihood.
Her career is on the line, suddenly.
Exactly. The internal monologue for the employee becomes panicked. If I say no to this spreadsheet, am I saying no to a promotion next year? Am I saying no to being recognized? Will they think I lack drive?
It is deeply manipulative, even if David doesn't mean it maliciously. He is probably just desperate to get the work done because his boss is breathing down his neck, so he uses whatever bait he has.
The anxiety flows downhill.
The anxiety flows downhill. But let's look at how Chloe handles this intense pressure. She doesn't take the bait. She executes steps 1 and 2 flawlessly.
She stays perfectly calm.
David pitches this shiny, stressful, fantastic opportunity, and Chloe takes a deliberate breath. She nails the bridge in step 1. She looks at him and says, wow, that does sound like an incredibly important project. I really appreciate you thinking of me for it.
It is a perfect execution of the emotional shock absorber.
Yeah.
She validates the urgency of the competitor launch, confirming that she understands why he is stressed, and she graciously acknowledges the compliment of being chosen. She hasn't committed to anything, but the bridge is solidly built. The tension is momentarily lowered.
And she goes right into step 2, the clear decline. She says, unfortunately, looking at my current workload, I don't have the bandwidth to take that on this week.
Direct and clear.
And she doesn't just stop there and leave it vague. She immediately ties it to objective reality. She reminds him that the alpha project testing is her top priority, and it requires her undivided attention to hit their Thursday deadline without catastrophic bugs.
Notice what she specifically did not do in this moment.
What's that?
This is crucial for the listener to internalize. She did not apologize profusely.
Oh, right. No, I'm so sorry.
She did not say, David, I am so sorry. I really wish I could help you. I feel terrible. Doing so would have signaled weakness and a willingness to negotiate.
It would invite him to push back harder.
Exactly. Instead, she used the firm, objective language of capacity. I don't have the bandwidth.
Yeah.
And by explicitly linking her lack of bandwidth to the Alpha project, which is not her personal hobby, but a shared critical business priority that David is also accountable for, she completely removes any personal subjectivity from her decline.
She uses the company's goals as her shield.
Exactly. She is basically holding up a mirror and saying, the physical math of our current deadlines does not allow for this new variable.
Okay, here is where the case study gets really interesting and where it proves its worth. Because in the real world, managers rarely just accept the first no smile and walk away.
Very rare.
David doesn't say, oh goodness, my mistake, carry on with Alpha. He pushes back.
Yeah.
Hard.
This is the critical juncture. This is the moment where 90% of people's boundaries crumble into dust.
They collapse.
Delivering the initial no takes courage, but holding the line when the authority figure applies pressure takes extreme discipline and emotional regulation.
And David applies the pressure. He calls the situation a massive fire drill. He says he knows she is swamped, but it's really, really important for Friday. And then he uses the 2 most dreaded phrases in corporate history.
I can guess.
Can't you just squeeze it in? Or maybe work a bit late tonight.
Ah, yes. Those phrases. Squeeze it in and work a bit late. Those phrases are the mortal enemies of high-quality work and the fast track to the burnout ward.
They really are.
They inherently imply that the employee's personal time, mental health, and cognitive load are infinitely elastic resources that can just be stretched indefinitely without snapping.
So how does Chloe defend the boundary here? Because you said holding ground is the hardest part. How does she not crumble and just say, fine, I'll order a pizza and stay until midnight?
It takes real focus.
She doesn't cave to the fire drill panic. She takes a breath. She reiterates her point, and she deploys that ultimate defense mechanism we talked about earlier. She becomes the guardian of quality.
Corporate judo.
Yes. She looks at David and tells him that if she were to split her focus right now, she would severely risk both the quality of the new marketing analysis and the stability of the entire Alpha launch.
A lose-lose situation.
And then she drops the hammer with that brilliant phrase, given the incredibly tight turnaround, I wouldn't be able to do the competitor analysis justice. And Alpha needs to be bug-free.
It is a masterful, impenetrable defense.
Let's analyze exactly why Chloe's response works so well here.
First, she absolutely refuses to engage with the emotional panic of his fire drill. She doesn't match his elevated heart rate.
He said days cool.
She remains entirely focused on professional outcomes. Second, she explicitly outlines the mutually assured destruction that will mathematically occur if she says yes.
Mutually assured destruction.
Yes. She makes David look at the reality of system lag. She tells him that if she says yes, both the new shiny project and the core alpha project will suffer.
She is basically looking at him and saying, David, if I open this massive new app right now, my phone will overheat and crash, and neither app will work for the meeting on Friday.
Precisely. She is forcing him to confront the reality of the physics. And by using the phrase "do it justice," she forces David into a corner where he must recognize that what he is actually asking for by demanding she squeeze it in is a rushed, sloppy, subpar product.
He's asking for bad work.
Yes. And she refuses to be the author of subpar work. She holds her ground not by being stubborn, but by becoming the fierce defender of the company's standards. She makes it impossible for him to argue without explicitly saying, I don't care about quality, just give me garbage.
It's so good. It is so strategic. But David is still physically stuck with a problem.
He still needs the work done.
Right. He sighs, he rubs his temples and says, look, that puts me in a really tough spot, Chloe. I need someone reliable on this today.
He's complaining, he's venting his stress, and this is the exact moment Chloe deploys step 3, the constructive alternative, the master move.
How exactly does she execute the pivot?
She pivots seamlessly to a colleague. She says, I completely get the bind you're in. What about Mark?
Okay, Mark.
And she doesn't just throw Mark under the bus to save herself. That would be toxic.
Right, that would backfire. She provides a highly solid strategic rationale. She explains to David that Mark worked heavily on the initial discovery phase of the Alpha project, so he already knows all the analytics tools inside and out.
Yeah.
She reframes the task as a fantastic step-up opportunity for Mark to get some visibility.
Brilliant.
And then, to ensure David isn't left feeling totally abandoned and unsupported, she offers a tiny, highly guarded, strictly defined slice of her own capacity.
The limited scope option.
Yes. She says, I can't do the analysis, but I can offer a 30-minute handover meeting with Mark this afternoon to help him structure his approach and get him started.
This is an astonishingly sophisticated professional maneuver. It looks simple on the surface, but the underlying mechanics are brilliant.
It's poetry.
Let's outline the multiple victories happening simultaneously in this single, well-crafted response. This is the definition of a complex win-win-win scenario.
Okay, let's break down the wins. I love a good breakdown. Win number 1 goes to the manager, David.
Yes. David's immediate panic-inducing staffing issue is solved. He needed a capable body to do the analysis, and instead of just giving him a brick wall of a no, Chloe provided a highly logical, qualified candidate.
She solved his problem.
He doesn't have to go back to his desk and hunt for a solution. She literally handed a viable solution to him on a silver platter. His stress level drops.
Win number 2 goes to Chloe.
Absolutely. Chloe's core time and mental energy remain fiercely protected. She successfully defended the integrity of the Alpha Project deadline, which was her primary directive.
She didn't have to work until midnight.
She completely avoided the burnout of working late on a Tuesday, and paradoxically, she maintained or even enhanced her reputation for high-quality strategic output.
Because she acted like a leader.
Exactly. She didn't look lazy. She looked like a leader prioritizing company goals, and she only sacrificed 30 minutes of her day, an amount she entirely controlled.
And win number 3 goes to Mark, the colleague.
Mark gets a genuine development opportunity. Think about what Chloe did here. She took the manipulative opportunity trap that David tried to weaponize against her, and she disarmed it and genuinely gifted it to a junior colleague who is likely hungry for a way to prove himself to leadership.
She passed the ball.
She facilitated career growth for someone else while protecting herself.
I am just marveling at the emotional intelligence required to pull that off. How Chloe turned a highly stressful, borderline manipulative workplace conflict into a collaborative, team-building, problem-solving moment.
It's rare, but it's so effective.
I want you listening to really think about how David feels at the end of this interaction as he walks away from her desk. If Chloe had just defensively said, no, David, I'm too busy, you have to find someone else, and turned back to her glowing monitor, David would have walked away feeling frustrated, entirely unsupported, and personally rejected.
He would have felt abandoned.
He would have gone to the Friday meeting feeling like Chloe wasn't a team player when the chips were down.
But because she utilized the complete 3-step framework, because she acknowledged his immense stress, defended her boundary based purely on objective quality and capacity, and offered a concrete, actionable solution, David walks away feeling supported.
Supported, even though she said no.
Exactly. He walks away feeling like he and his top analyst just collaboratively solved a difficult management problem together. It is a stunning paradox, but by saying no in this specific, structured way, she actually increased her professional capital and trust with her manager.
That is the ultimate takeaway here.
Yeah.
That is the entire paradigm shift we promised at the beginning of the deep dive. Saying no in a professional setting isn't about shutting people down.
No, it isn't.
It isn't about being unhelpful or selfish or lazy. As Chloe demonstrated so perfectly in the case study, it is about strategically and ruthlessly managing your finite energy and your time so that you can consistently deliver excellent results where it matters most for the business. It is about waking up and accepting the reality that you cannot be everything to everyone, but you can and must be excellent at the core thing you're supposed to be doing.
It requires a profound and often uncomfortable shift away from the deeply ingrained people-pleasing instincts that so many of us rely on as a crutch in our early careers.
The people-pleasing is real.
It demands that we respect our own capacity enough to rigorously defend it. If I can leave you listening with a final, lingering thought drawn from these themes, something to really chew on during your next team meeting, it's this.
Okay, lay it on us.
I want you to imagine the overall health, productivity, and innovation of a workplace where every single employee defaults to protecting the quality of their work with a thoughtful, reasoned no, rather than defaulting to protecting their ego and avoiding conflict with a panicked, reflexive yes.
Wow.
Think of the drop in compounding errors. Think of the reduction in passive-aggressive emails. How much more effective, how much more highly functioning, and how much healthier would that team actually be?
That is an incredibly fascinating question to ponder. What would actually happen if we all just stopped wildly lunging to catch every falling knife in the kitchen and instead focused our energy on carefully, deliberately preparing the meal we were already cooking?
A much better meal.
It would be a game changer. So, to you listening, the next time you feel that unthinking professional reflex kicking in, the next time your boss walks in with a donut and an opportunity and your plate is simply too full, try out these phrases.
Step 1, 2, and 3.
Build the bridge. State your capacity, and offer a map. See what happens when you actively protect your bandwidth. Thank you for diving so deep with us today into the art of the strategic no.
It has been an absolute pleasure to unpack the psychology and the tactics of this with you today.
Until next time, take a hard look at your own mental background apps, close a few of the unnecessary ones down, and vigorously protect your battery life. Catch you on the next deep dive.